1% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get pumped, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in a Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the hustlers quick to roll, the gangsters don't move. Whatever click you choose, you better
say what's cracking, YouTube. It's your boy 16 to life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down. Now, for those of y'all that's new to my page, in 1994, I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years plus life, and I served 24 years straight in the California prison system. Yeah, that's me gassing on that intro song. And if you want to get that song, hit me up on my email, 16tolifemusic@gmail.com, and I will give you the information on how to get it. Now, let's get right into this video. So today, I'm going to be doing a reaction to a channel known as Respectable Rants. And we have a pretty unfortunate story of how an individual lost his life in prison. It appears to be to the hands of his cellie. Now, the individual who lost his life, he went by the name of Gotti, and they are saying that he's from rolling 40'S Crip. This is a very unfortunate situation, and without further ado, let's get right into this video.
A homicide investigation is underway after an inmate was found dead at Kern Valley State Prison, lying in his cell with what appeared to be serious injuries. His cellmate was standing in the cell. Staff began life-saving measures.
The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is conducting a homicide investigation this morning after an inmate was stabbed to death at Kern Valley State Prison.
Authorities at the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation are investigating a Kern Valley State Prison inmate death as a homicide.
In today's video, we're going to be talking about a situation that happened at Kern Valley State Prison where a Rolling 40 member was killed by his cellmate, and his cellmate was a Rolling 100 member. But let's dive right into it. Staff was...
Now, before we get into this real quick, I want to say that I believe this prison is a level 4 prison. The neighborhoods where these two individuals are from, most of the times in most prisons, are in the same car. You know, they are an alliance. And the cold thing about these prison cars, which of course have individuals coming from the streets, is it's so tricky that, you know, literally 1 week the cars could be an alliance and then something will happen on the streets, and the next week there could be some potential beef. So who knows exactly what it is that caused this situation to turn out the way it did, but let's get into it.
Conduct an account at 3 o'clock in the morning on June 28th of 2026 when they would notice that somebody named Tyron Meeks was unresponsive in his cell. They would notice blood in the cell, and they would notice how it looked like that a scuffle just took place. They would then put his cellmate in restraints and remove him from the cell, and his cellmate's name was Robert Green from the Rolling Hundreds. Staff immediately issued an alarm and began providing medical aid to Meeks. Prison staff activated 911, and they continued life-saving measures while they transported him to the prison's treatment area. They would then wait for outside paramedics to arrive, but when paramedics arrived, they pronounced Meeks dead at 3:26 in the morning, which was 26 minutes after they found him. And they would say that Tyron Meeks' cause of death was blunt and sharp force injuries. And Tyron Meeks would be Gotti from the Rolling 40'S, and he was incarcerated for 2 separate cases. They received him from Los Angeles County on November 29th of 2017, where he was serving an 8-year sentence for a first-degree robbery, where he would have been released at the end of 2025, but on September 1st of 2022, he was sentenced to an additional 2 years to run consecutive for catching a case while in state prison. In this case, would be assault by a prisoner with any means of force likely to cause great bodily injury.
So that's crazy. So they said that he would have been out had he not caught a assault on a prisoner, which gave him an additional 2 years, man. So wow, cold situation, man. You know, going to prison, anything could happen. And this individual, of course, didn't even have a life sentence. But due to getting charged with a great bodily injury on a prisoner. They gave him 2 additional years, and then this happened. Crazy, man. Unfortunate.
So now his release date was pushed to the end of 2027. And like we said, the situation happened on June 28th of 2026. And that was 7 months after his original release date before catching this new case. But Tyron Meeks, aka Gotti, would be a known face from the Rolling 40s. As you can see right here in this picture, this would be him, Baby Rich, and Tiny Hardhead. And Tiny Hardhead would be the person that passed away from Rolling 40s that Crip Mac's always speaking about. And this right here would be a picture of him, Baby Runner, and Spodiana, aka Lady Fody Loke. But since the age of 18, Gotti would be in and out of jail, where his first adult arrest happened on July 20th of 2013, and he was arrested for 1 count of grand theft auto and 1 count of taking a vehicle without consent. But after sitting in the county jail for 2 months, he would take a plea deal on this case, and he would plead no contest to taking a vehicle without consent, and he would have the grand theft auto dismissed. And he took this plea deal on September 5th of 2013, where they would give him 3 years of probation on that same day. But Gotti would only be free for 11 days before he was arrested again on September 16th of 2013.
Now, did you hear that? He said he got out and he only stayed out 11 days. And I seen a lot of that type stuff happen when I was locked up in prison, man. You know, when people leave, they got homies on the yard and they keep in contact with them and they hear about them. And sometimes stuff like that happens, you know. I remember specifically this one dude, man, from East Coast Crips. I ain't going to say his name, but, you know, he had done a considerable amount of time. He got out. He was still relatively young, though. And he said he was supposed to get out and go take care of his daughter. And, you know, he was supposed to leave the flocking alone. Flocking is what they call burglarizing houses. And unfortunately, man, we heard in about 2 or 3 months later, he was back in jail, caught up on a flocking case,
where they charged him with 1 count of attempted grand theft from a person. But as you can see, he would take a plea deal 2 days after he was arrested on September 18th of 2013. And they gave him 3 years of probation for this case and reinstated his probation for the other case. So now he was a free man. But 3 months after taking that probation deal, Gotti would be arrested again on December 1st of 2013, where they charged him with 1 count of robbery. But as you can see again, he would take a plea deal fast. He would take a plea deal 17 days after he was arrested. And he took his plea deal on December 18th of 2013. And on that day, they gave him 3 years in state prison. He would then do his bid in state prison, and he would be released at the end of 2016. But Gotti would only be free for about 11 months before he caught a new case. And this time he was arrested on October 12th of 2017. But as you can see, a month after he was arrested, he would take a plea deal on November 14th of 2017. And this would be the most recent case that he was serving time for, where they gave him 8 years in state prison. Where, like we said, he was scheduled to be released at the end of 2025, but he caught that new case. But as for Gotti's cellmate, Robert Green from the Rolling Hundreds, it's alleged that he's from underground block Crip. And they would say that they received Robert Green from Los Angeles County on October 7th of 2014.
Now, you just heard him say that he was from Rolling Hundreds Crip, and the other individual, Gotti, was from Rolling 40'S. Now, in prison, you know, you got the Rolling 40'S, just to name a few. You got the Rolling 60s, you got the Rolling 90s, you know, and for the most part, or at least when I was doing time and all of the prisons that I've been in, they function as one collective. And so, of course, a lot of times when you do function within a specific collective in prison, a lot of times you will like to sail up with one of your homeboys or one of your homies from that collective. So for a number of reasons. Well, one reason because you guys get along, but for a number of reasons. And one reason, if something happens to go bad on the yard with your car and another car, you're in the cell with a homie. You know, I told a story about being in the cell with another individual from another car. Our 2 cars just happened to get into it on the yard, and the dude rushed me on the yard, my cellie at that time, even though we had been in the cell for about 6-7 months. So it's just a lot of things that go on in prison that people try to do as a preventative measure. But anyway, let's get back to this story.
And he was serving 31 years for voluntary manslaughter with gang enhancements. But he was arrested for this murder on April 24th of 2011. And as you can see, he was arrested on the same day as the offense date. And at first, they charged him with 1 count of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. But after sitting in the county jail for 1.5 years, they would dismiss the attempted murder. But Robert Green from the Rolling Hundreds would sit in the county jail from 2011 to 2014. And don't forget that Tyron Meeks, aka Gotti, caught majority of his cases in 2013. And they're both from Rolling Crip, so at one point, they were in the county jail together. But Robert Green pleaded guilty on September 23rd of 2014 to voluntary manslaughter, where they gave him 31 years in state prison. But a few years into his bid, Robert Green would catch another case while in state prison. and they gave him an additional 4 years for manufacturing deadly weapons while in prison. But before Robert Greene was arrested for this murder, he was in and out of jail since 2004 up until 2011, where his first adult arrest happened at the age of 19 on July 3rd of 2004. And they would charge him with 1 count of having a firearm on a person. And he took a plea deal on this case almost 3 weeks later, on July 21st of 2004. And on that day, they gave him 3 years of probation. But 2 months after taking probation, he would be arrested again on September 15th of 2004. And they charged him with 1 count of possession of base for sale. But he would take his plea deal 2 weeks after being arrested on September 27th of 2004. And they would give him 3 years of probation for this case and reinstate his probation for the other case. But 8 months after taking that plea deal, he would be arrested again on May 21st of 2005, where they charged him with 1 count of felon in possession of a firearm. But after sitting in the county for a little under 2 months, he would take a plea deal on July 6th of 2005. And on that day, they would give him 3 years and 8 months in state prison. Robert Greene from the Rolling Hunnets was then released at the end of 2008. But just a few days after being released, he was arrested again on January 30th of 2009. And this time they would charge him with 1 count of felon in possession of a firearm, 1 count of carrying a concealed weapon in a vehicle, and 1 count of carrying a loaded firearm. But after sitting in the county jail for about a month, they would allow him to bail out on February 27th of 2009 for $35,000. He would then be able to fight this case from the streets, but 7 months after bailing out, he would take a plea deal on September 15th of 2009. And he pled no contest to 1 count of felon in possession of a firearm, and he had the other 2 counts dismissed. And on that day, they gave him 5 years of probation. And he ended up staying out of trouble for about 2 years before he caught his murder in April of 2011. And he could have paroled in May of 2040. But as of right now, Greene was medically evaluated and he remains in a restricted housing unit pending an investigation. And as of right now, he's not charged with a murder, but I think it's safe to assume that he's going to be charged with it. But let me know what you guys think about them both being from the Rolling car and how they were cellmates. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. But that right there is going to wrap it up for this video, and I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Comment, like, and subscribe. I appreciate y'all. It's Respectable Rants.
Yeah, that's definitely an unfortunate story, man. You know, rest in peace to the brother Gotti who lost his life. And some people may be listening to this and they may be wondering, you know, how did these guys go to jail? They sit in jail for a little while, they get out, they get caught again, they run back, they go for a while, they get out. Why do they continue to run back to the same behavior? You know, and a lot of times it's unfortunate that jail and prison is not about rehabilitation first and foremost. You know, you go to jail, especially when you're younger, it's almost like it's a big party. You know, you're in there with a lot of your homies, and especially if you happen to be from a neighborhood where there are going to be many individuals from your neighborhood in prison. And both of these dudes are from neighborhoods like that, right? And so when you go to prison and it's a bunch of your homies there who are like-minded and especially more younger, even though if you have older homies on the yard trying to give you guys good advice, you over there doing what the youngsters do. And so the mentality never changes. And that's why, you know, a lot of times individuals will go in, go out, go in, go out on these smaller cases until they unfortunately sometimes wind up catching a more serious case. Now, the dude who lost his life, unfortunately, you saw the dude from the channel here, Respectable Rants, go back and pretty much review his whole criminal history. So if everything he has is accurate, right, there's nothing in his criminal history that led me to believe that the incident that these two individuals got into stemmed from some bad charges that he had in the past. Because of course, if you come to jail, let's just say you come to jail in 2022 on some bad charges, and then you get out or whatever, then you come back in 2025, not saying or implying whatsoever that is the case here. This is a simple example. When you come back on the case of 2025, you're going to have the paperwork for 2025. So you'll present that and show that, okay, on this particular charge, this is what I'm in here for, right? So, but that, once again, is not even what happened here. So nothing from his past, according to the cases that was reviewed here, makes me think a situation like that occurred, right? And so you have two individuals who function under the same banner in prison. They're with the same alliance. They both, you know, they roll with the neighborhood car, right? And so they're cellies. And then they get into it, and dude is pronounced dead at 3:26 in the morning, right? So it could be a whole bunch of stuff, you know. So for me to even speculate what happened would merely would be just that, a speculation. Sometimes you got two individuals who just for whatever reason they start to clash in the cell. The cell is extremely small, right? This is an analogy that I've always used, right? Sometimes you may have a man and a woman living in a very spacious home, a mansion even, with with a lot of money, and for whatever reason they're engaged in a physical relationship, of course, this man and this woman, and they cannot even get along in this big giant house with with access to going outside and doing whatever. So imagine putting two grown men in a very small cell and expect for them to be compatible and not get along and have disagreements. It could be simply something as an individual hasn't heard from his girlfriend. He hasn't got mail in a couple of days or whatever. Something that's rubbing him the wrong way. Maybe something that his cellmate done that wouldn't necessarily have bothered him a couple of days ago had he not been in a foul mood from whatever put him in a foul mood, right? But so these individuals, whatever the situation was, they happened to get into it late at night, and then during the count, the guard discovers that one of these dudes is unresponsive because in a situation like that, when you get locked down at 9 o'clock, the guard, he'll come back, they'll count at 9, then they'll come back maybe around 11:30, 12, then they'll come back at 2 or 3 and do these periodic checks, which is basically just walking through, shining a flashlight in there to see, if everybody is, everything is on the up and up. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I guess, he saw one of these dudes standing up, and then he proceeded to do, I guess, more of a search or looking in and check, and then found one of these dudes was unresponsive, right? So who knows what is the real cause of what led these two individuals to get into it. Maybe it was an issue that night. Maybe they had been bumping heads for a while. It's a sad situation because, once again, the brother Gotti, Tyrone Meeks, he was due to go home soon, I believe like in 7 months, and he should have been home had he not caught an extra charge up in there. Now, the other individual, the situation was a little different. He wasn't due to go home until 2040, I believe they said. He had a voluntary manslaughter, 31 years, and he was going to have to do about 80 to 85% of that due to the fact that it was a violent crime. And so possibly his mentality about doing time was different. Maybe, who knows? It's just a sad situation, because a lot of times, or at least when I was doing time in prison, it was a major violation for one homie to pull a weapon on another homie who was in the same car, or even to pull a knife on another Crip for that matter. I don't know the mentality of individuals nowadays, right? But when I was doing time, it was very, very, very disrespectful, and it was an extreme violation to do something like that, right? I told a story about an individual who pulled a knife out on one of his homies who happened to function with that same car, not one of his immediate homies from his neighborhood, but just a homie who functioned with that same car, and he was knocked out on the yard, and he was done pretty bad, right? Just for simply pulling a knife on another individual. So for this dude to actually not only pull a knife and stab and take the life of one of his homies, who knows what that situation is about, So anyway, man, it's an ugly situation. It's unfortunate, and it just shows that everybody who goes to prison doesn't necessarily always come home from prison alive. And once again, the individual who lost his life was not doing life. He didn't have a considerable amount of time, and he was what we would call short to the house, meaning that he didn't have much time to go at the time his life was unfortunately took from him. So more than likely, of course, they will charge his cellie eventually with taking his life, because if you and another individual are the only individuals in that cell, you guys are locked in, because at that time of the night, they're locked in. No one else has access to that cell. I mean, it's not really hard to do the math and figure out that the person who is left in the cell is the culprit. Anyway, y'all already know what this is. It's your boy 16 to Life. Resume normal program.